Hey guys, how you doing? I'm Matt Gear and this is Matt Gear TV on YouTube. Thank you for tuning in. Today I'm going to talk to you about the modes of the diatonic scale. So far I've put quite a few lessons up about this. I've put lessons up, one for each of the 7 diatonic shapes. Also put a lesson on how you can start joining those together and what the modes actually are in terms of how you spell them and how they actually relate back to the major mode, their parent mode. And also I've shown you the parallel way of looking at modes, so starting on the same note, playing the individual modes so that you can hear their sounds relative to one another, and we looked at that in a previous lesson. So I've done all of that, and today what I'm going to start talking to you about is how you can actually go about applying the modes. If you've not seen the other lessons, do go and check them out, because otherwise if you're not entirely sure what a mode is or how one mode's different from the other, then this is going to be a little bit confusing for you. So it's important to make sure that you're well grounded, you've got the shapes of the modes under your fingers, you know how they all slot together to make one big diatonic scale. And once you know that and you know the different sounds of the modes, then we can start thinking about how you can apply them. So if you have done all of that, then let's get stuck in. What we're going to do today is I'm basically going to show you how you can relate any particular mode back to its parent diatonic scale. From that you can then decide how you want to go about playing it. Because as we've seen before, although we said, you know, here's an Aeolian shape, that's great, here's a Dorian shape, and all the other shapes as well, they all stick together. You know, what you break things down to make it easy to explain to people and easy to understand. If you went, here's a diatonic scale, and it starts here and it finishes here, and it covers all the different modes, and you've got to learn it in all different shapes, your head would explode because there's so much information there. So we break it down into slightly artificial chunks, these 3-note per string shapes, which we've looked at before. What we're going to do today though is I'll show you how actually you can use any one of those shapes to play any one of the modes. So I've written a few examples down which I'm going to show you, and basically we're going to work back from saying, okay, I want to play this particular mode. How can I do that? How can I go about doing that? Do bear in mind as well that this is slightly artificial in terms of how you would go about playing the modes, because you don't just wake up in the morning and go, hey, yeah, do you know what, I'm going to play some Aeolian today, wicked, and off you go. Because what makes Aeolian is the chords that you play it over and the tonal centre that you're playing it over. So the mode that you play in will be determined by the music that you're playing with. You know, the music that you're soloing over or playing a melody over. We're not going to talk about chord theory today though, because it's a pretty big subject and it gets quite complicated in a way, and so I'm going to build that up over some other lessons in the same way that I've done with these modes. For today though, what we'll do is we'll say, right, we're going to pick a mode and we're going to relate that back to the parent diatonic scale and see how we can play that. So let's get started. So the first thing that we're going to do is, first example, we're going to talk about a Mixolydian. Now, if you've seen the previous lessons, which hopefully you have, you'll know that, well, there's an A here, 5th fret of the low E string, and actually there is a Mixolydian shape and we can play and it's a major mode as well, so we can do that and that works fine. However, what I want to be able to do is for you guys to be able to go, well actually I know I can play that there, but what about if I'm up here? How do I go about playing that particular mode up here? Well, here's how you do it. So if we've got a Mixolydian, we're going to work up, because Mixolydian is kind of a little bit over halfway. We could work back down as well, but we're going to go up. So a Mixolydian, I know that if I take a step up from that, I get to the Aeolian mode that relates to that, which in this case is B. One more step up and we're in the Locrian mode. Remember that whole step, half step pattern that we talked about in the previous lesson. And then one more step and we're back to the Ionian mode, which is the parent diatonic scale. and that is a D. So what we've got is basically a parent scale of D diatonic, so everything comes from that. So what that means is if I want to play a Mixolydian, say I don't know the Mixolydian shape, if I can work out the fact that D diatonic is the parent scale and I know the D Ionian shape, if you're going to learn any shapes, learn the Ionian, learn the Aeolian as well, because then you've got two which are quite far apart, and so you can actually apply this method much more easily. Ideally you'll learn all 7, but you know, if you're just getting into it, learn Ionian, learn Aeolian as well. So we figured out that D diatonic is the parent of a Mixolydian, so I can play the D Ionian shape. So that to your ears is going to sound like I'm just playing a D major scale, and it does, because that's what you're hearing as the tonal centre. Check out what happens though when I loop an A note underneath that and then go ahead and play the D Ionian shape. So there's my looped note, there's my looped A, and that's what we're going to be playing over, because we want, that's tonal centre, we're playing a Mixolydian. But to play a Mixolydian, what I'm going to do, I'm playing the Ionian shape, but I can hear the pull, the tonal centre is that A. And there, that's the flat 7. So it's not major, major 7, flat 7. So in that example, we used D diatonic, D Ionian, to play the A Mixolydian mode. And we did that by finding the parent diatonic. So A Mixolydian is from the D diatonic family, so starting with D Ionian, and then we played D Ionian. So that's great, that's an easy way of doing it. So in the next example I'm going to show you how we can play E Phrygian using an Ionian scale shape. Okay, so if we go back to the lessons previously, we know we can actually play, we can play this up at the 12th fret using that Phrygian shape. But I don't want to do that, I want to use the Ionian shape because that's the one that I'm most comfortable with, for example. Again, if you can learn all the shapes, that's great, and you can stick them all together, but this method enables you to choose which one of the modal shapes you want to use to play any mode. Now, I know that the Phrygian mode is the 3rd mode of the diatonic scale, so I know it's a major 3rd up from the Ionian, or from the parent diatonic scale. So if I step back here, my 12th fret on the E, 10th fret on the D, 8th fret is the C. So C, so C diatonic is the parent scale of E Phrygian. So when I just played that, that sounded like C major because you were hearing C as the tonal centre. If I now play this over an E, you'll hear E Phrygian. So let's do that. So there's my looped E, and here I am playing C Ionian, so starting on the 8th fret of the low E string. So we can hear that that sounds anything other than major. It's clearly not the Ionian mode anymore, but we're using the Ionian shape. And the reason that it's Phrygian, the reason it's E Phrygian, is because we're playing it over an E tonal centre. So without the loop track, if I play the C Ionian shape, but I don't play the C or the D, I start on the E, and I play an octave, I'm creating a tonal centre there by starting and finishing on that note, and that now sounds like E Phrygian. Okay, so now we know that we can use the Ionian shape, C Ionian, to play E Phrygian. Now, we can actually use any of the shapes from the C diatonic scale over that looped E, and it will still sound like E Phrygian, because remember, this is just one whole series of notes. It's not just one octave. You've got as many octaves as you can cover on the fretboard of your guitar from here. So although we're saying C Ionian, you could play D Dorian shape, you've got E Phrygian shape, and so on and so forth in all these different directions. So any of those modes, modal shapes from the C diatonic family will work over that E note to create a Phrygian tonality. Hopefully that makes sense. If you've got any questions, put a comment in the box below. I'm going to do one more now, okay? One more. So the last example I'm going to show you is E minor, so the E Aeolian mode. Now, again, we could play this up at the 12th fret, but I want to bring this back to the parent. Okay, I want to bring this back to the parent diatonic scale. So I know that Aeolian is the 6th mode of the diatonic scale. So if that's 6, that's 7, that's 8, which is back to 1. So that's a G. So what we know is from that is that the G diatonic scale is the parent of E minor. So what we can do is, if I now loop this again, I've still got the E going on my trusty rolling cue. So there's the E note again, but this time I'm going to play G major over this, the G Ionian shape. So now we can hear, there's the root. And we can see that actually if we extend this through the Locrian shape, that one note there, we can play, and this lends itself to a 3-octave. Run, which takes in the Ionian shape and the Dorian shape and the Phrygian shape. So there you go. What we've been able to do from that lesson is see how with any mode we can actually relate it back to a parent diatonic scale, and then within that diatonic framework you can then pick whichever one of those shapes that you want to use to play the particular mode in question. So we saw, I just need to refer to my notes, we saw how you can play A Mixolydian using the D diatonic family, E Phrygian using the C Ionian family, and E Aeolian using the G diatonic family. Now, as I said before, in an ideal world you'd know all of these shapes and you'd be able to play them inside out, and that should be the goal really. You should be trying to do that so that you can stop thinking about shapes and then just hearing the sounds and going, right, I know where I am, I know what to play. If you're starting off, that might seem like a pretty big task, and it can take a while to get them under your fingers and to be, completely familiar with them. So, if you're still struggling with this a little bit, don't worry about it, don't beat yourself up about it, just keep practicing and keep running the drills from the previous lesson I've shown you. What I would recommend is if you can get really familiar with a couple of the shapes, so as I suggested, the Ionian shape and the Aeolian shape, What you can then do is, using the method that I've shown you today, you can basically go back to the diatonic, parent diatonic scale for any mode, and you can use either one of those shapes, and you can easily drop into any mode you want. So that's everything for today. Hopefully that's made sense. If anybody's got any questions, please do put them in the comments box below. Thank you very much to those of you who have commented that they've enjoyed the previous lessons. It's really good to hear from you guys, and I do really appreciate it, so thank you very much for that. And thank you very much to everyone who subscribed as well, because I recently ticked over 500 subscribers on my channel, which I was really, really pleased with. So thanks again for that, guys. If you've not subscribed already, please do so. It'd be much appreciated again. But just thanks for watching, really. In subsequent lessons, what I'm going to do, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to start talking about chord theory. Because it's kind of, chord theory is the other side of the modes. With modes, we tend to be thinking about playing melodies and thinking about playing solos rather than chords. And as I've said before, the modes only really exist when you're playing them over a chord progression. You can play a mode and say, right, I'm going to play something, I'm going to make it sound Lydian. Yes, you can do that without any chords playing, but you know, really it comes into its own. The modes come into their own when you're playing them over changes. You're playing them over a chord progression. And so what we'll do is, as I said, subsequent lessons I'm going to start talking about chord theory, and then once we've done a few lessons on that, we can basically stick these two things together, and you can go, okay, I've got chords here, I've got modes here, and you can see how they both fit together to make music, basically. That's what it's all about. So until then, you guys take it easy, keep practicing, keep playing guitar, keep enjoying it, and I will see you guys next time. So I've been Matt Gear, this has been Matt Gear TV. Until then, you guys take it easy, I'll talk to you soon. Cheers.